Dun
Bum,
dun dun
bum,
dun
bum,
dun
bum, bum, bum,
dun
bum.
dun 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 dun.
Bum.
Kilted
Kilted
balls.
balls.
All right. So, what was my
Awesome.
inspiration tonight, baby? Did you catch it?
Oh, was I supposed to be listening to what you were singing?
Nope, because I didn't hear a thing you were singing.
When I go back and listen to it, it'll be perfect harmony for sure.
Oh my gosh, it'll probably be amazing. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Kilted Balls podcast. Hope your week was fan freaking tastic.
No kidding.
You keep wearing your V Friends hat, and I keep forgetting.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Gina got hers in actually too. So she has the I forget what she did. Oh, the astronaut on the front, and then the intuitive
nice,
iguana on the side.
nice. Well, my theme song inspiration today was the birthday thing because I just sang "Happy Birthday" to one of my kiddos who turned 18.
That is so exciting.
I know. I still think they look like they're 12,
Mm-hmm.
but 18 is a good year. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. But
See, I
yeah,
was thinking about that earlier. I wasn't sure what we had planned for tonight,
yeah.
but we've been talking about a lot of the, obviously way self-help and things that we've learned and trying to pass that along to people. But if you didn't have anything planned, do you want to go take that route?
The self-help route.
Well, no, yeah, because I was thinking if like as a 18, what would like are you telling her anything profound or something that you were told when you were younger that you loved that helped you a lot or something that would have been more beneficial to know when you were that
No,
age? Because that
no.
is a big age. Like, there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah. So my 18-year-old is so freaking wise. Like
She's very wise.
she's so much wiser than I am that I really feel like any advice I give her most of the time would actually hold her back. like like this, I'm like, oh, that's probably not great. Like, but she's been with me for so long in so many like different aspects that a
Mhm.
lot of my views have, just accidentally rubbed off on her, right?
That's awesome.
And our parenting style, so I guess maybe this is self-help for other people.
Hmm.
Two of my daughters, like a pseudo daughter and the other one, they both took psychology classes different times, but
Hmm.
part of it was assessing like what people's parenting styles were. And so they were just laughing about our parenting style. And they're like, you guys are like textbook. I don't remember what it was.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, is that like good or bad? And they're like, no, it's really good, but like nobody ever does it. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like, I don't even understand what it is. And they're like, well, you kind of let people figure it out, but you're there for support. And it's not so much about punishment as it is like disappointment
Hmm.
and, this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, I hate to break it to you, but that's just pure laziness. Like, that's not that's not a parenting style.
Laziness makes you an awesome parent.
I'm like, we're just too lazy to like fight with you on stuff.
Hmm. That
But
is so funny.
but they're always like, you set rules, you follow rules, like how I am with that kind of stuff. Like
Hmm.
I don't ask a lot, but when I ask it, I expect it, and I'm instantaneous. So that's like another thing, right? Like even my little kiddos, like if we have a rule, like let's pick something obvious, like you don't run in a parking lot, like you hold hands in a parking lot, right?
Hmm.
And if my kiddo doesn't hold my hand in a parking lot, like retribution is instantaneous and fast, right?
Hmm.
It's like bam, it's like you won't even blink, right?
Hmm.
And the thing that I think people mess up when they're deciding how to do stuff is very rarely when my kiddos are young, there's never anger involved with that, right? So it's
Hmm.
like there's like I'm never like my parents, I felt, and maybe I was wrong, but I used to get spanked every day, while whether I needed it or not.
Hmm.
And some of those times I feel like they were mad.
Hmm. I've been there. I've been there.
Right? Like I think they were angry. And like my kiddos gotten in trouble before and maybe got spanked once
Hmm.
or twice, but I've never been like angry. It's more like, okay, like you made this decision and now this is kind of what it is. Now there have been times where I have been frustrated, and I think that's when it's bad, right? Like
Yeah.
that's when you as a parent you need to like kind of step
Hmm.
back and not, but that's hard, right? Like
Yes.
parenting's not an easy task, right?
Hmm.
So that happens sometimes. Um, but when they get older, like, sometimes they get in trouble and they get yelled at.
Yeah.
But so for the 18-year-old, she's absorbed a lot of that. But it's interesting because as she was growing up, like we tend, when they're teenagers and stuff, we talk politics and stuff a little bit more because they'll ask or they'll
Hmm.
say something. But in general, we try not to talk about that stuff. Like
Yeah.
not like it's not like we had a talk one day and we're like, let's not talk about politics around our kids. It just we don't in general like do that in front of the kids. So like there was
Hmm.
never a thing. It just didn't happen, right? Like
Yeah.
when we were around the kids, we're talking about other stuff.
Hmm.
But it's interesting how like this 18-year-old or any of them really, how their views have developed with us never talking about any of it,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I really feel it's because of the beliefs that you and I have referenced so many times, right?
Hmm.
Like loving everybody, assuming good intentions, all of that kind of stuff that we talk about. When you live that way, that filters through
Yes.
to the kiddos.
Hmm.
But here is one of my like favorite stories from my 18-year-old to kind of show you guys what I mean about her being wise. And for some of you, this may actually offend you. I don't know. I also really, really don't care, honestly and truly, if it does.
I think we
So,
have a mix of listeners, and some
yeah.
people maybe. I know a
Yes.
story you're referencing, and it's
Oh,
one of my
good.
favorites as well. So
Right.
yes,
Well, and
tell it.
you know me, I don't
And
care a
this.
lot about people's feelings on that kind of
Hmm.
stuff anyway.
Yep.
But so when she was in middle school, like I'm talking about school that day or whatever, and
Hmm.
I'm like, how was school? And she's like, oh, good. I had to write a persuasive essay. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, how'd you do? And she goes, yeah, I think I did fine. We had to like talk about it a little bit.
Hmm.
And um, I'm like, well, what was your essay about? And I can't remember if it was persuasive or a debate or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I had to write about like same-sex marriage. Or that's what I chose to write about. I'm like, oh, interesting, because we've never talked about that.
Hmm.
We're a pretty, like, as far as the parents are concerned, pretty religious family,
Hmm.
right? But that's not anything that just it never popped up in conversation,
Yeah.
right? Not positive, not negative, just like the same reason like we don't talk about like our sex lives necessarily in front of the kiddos. We don't necessarily talk about other people's.
Hmm.
So like that's not a
Yeah.
normal dinner conversation. Like I
Yeah.
always think it's weird when other people are talking to kids about that. Like not weird, like bad, but it's just
Hmm.
I believe things come up organically, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm like, oh, so what was your stance? Because I literally had no idea
Hmm.
what her position would be on same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like I don't understand. Like, were you writing for it or against it? And she's like, I think it should stay the same. I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Hmm.
Like, what do you mean? And she goes, well, she goes, I think right now you can marry or do whatever you want. And I'm like, sure. And she goes, and I think that she goes, it should stay that like she goes, I don't even understand. She goes, I don't even understand why it's a question. And I'm like, what do
Hmm.
you mean? And she was like, if I wanted to marry a girl or you wanted to marry a guy, she's like, I don't under I she goes, I literally just don't understand why people have an issue. And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, some people think it's wrong, like for a guy to love a guy. And she's like, and again, you'll see how our messages
Hmm.
resonate, right? But she's like, loving's loving, She goes, it doesn't make any sense. She goes, like, if you love somebody, then you love them.
Yeah.
And she goes, and if you want to spend the rest of your life with them, then you want to spend the rest of your life with them. She goes, I don't understand that. And I'm like, well, people like they just think that's wrong. And she goes, why would, and she said this differently, so I'm probably going to massacre listeners, but she was like, why would I use blue jeans to determine if I loved somebody? And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, like, if some people like blue jeans or they like slacks, should that be the deciding factor of whether I think they're worthy of love or not worthy of love? And I'm like, no, that I think everybody would agree that's probably not right. And she goes, right. She goes, so why would I use whether they were male or female to be the deciding factor? She goes, like, why would that be the thing that makes it different? She goes, I'm more likely to not like you because of your hair than I am because of your sex. She goes, I can't even like visually see your sex half of the time. She goes, so why would that? She goes, what your personality is, what your beliefs are, how we match up, what we talk about, how we hang out. She goes, like, those are things that matter. She goes, your sex might as well be the clothes you're wearing. She goes, that's the stupidest thing ever, that's how you determine who you loved. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I think you might have just blown my mind. And she's like, well, seriously. She goes, like, you love mom, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. And she goes, so would it matter if she was a guy? I'm like, what? Maybe. Like, I go, I think it might matter if she's a guy. She goes, but you love her not for that. She goes, or is that the only reason you love her? It's because she's a girl. And I'm like, no, it's not the reason I love her. Like, I'm like, you're blowing my mind. I don't even understand. Like, it totally was not even in her brain that was a metric you would use. Like, why is that a metric?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know why it's the metric. I go, the only reason it's a metric is for procreation. I go, that's why it's a metric, because that's how you breed. I go, so we are programmed to breed. So that's why it's a metric, because that's the only way I can breed.
Yeah.
And she was right, but aren't we kind of past that now? Like, we don't need to just breed all the time. And I'm like, well, that's how you get idiocracy, right? Like, that's how you get idiots running society if the smart people don't breed. She goes, yeah, but we can just go to the doctor and breed. Right? Like, I'm just like, and I'm just like, wow, like, that's the kind of wisdom she would lay down, right? Like,
yeah,
she'd be like, I don't even understand, like, right? And that's kind of carried through, and she's very intelligent about stuff like that. Like, she had to do a lot of interviews this last year, and she would like just go and talk to people, and she'd be nervous, right? But she'd go and talk to people, and she'd be like, yeah. She goes, it's just really important that you express how strong of a person you are. She goes, so like, I lean forward when I'm talking. She goes, and she's a little person, but she's like, I make myself big.
Yeah. Exactly.
She's like, and I take up the area and I hold my space. And I'm like, who teaches you this? Like, but for her, it's just like innate to know that, and she processes it. And so anyway, yeah, I don't know how much I try to add when I can.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the, especially that example right there is not, I can't remember. I can't like look back and think, just being the kind of person I am anyways. Nor can I with you, but obviously we weren't together all the time.
Right.
But I can't remember any times where there was someone of that persuasion that I acted badly towards.
Right.
So, that's not like a less, but growing up in small town America, you don't experience that very much. No. So it can be.
And don't, for any of you right now thinking, oh yeah, these guys are saints or whatever, understand that there's a huge difference between Kilted and me. So Kilted can't remember an instance where he saw somebody who was homosexual or transgendered or whatever, and he treated them badly. I treat everybody badly. So I can't remember a time where I treated somebody like that differently from how I treat everybody else.
That is true. You have to preference that.
Right, right. So don't think we're like, he is good. He's good. That's how he is. I was not good. I just was mean to everyone. Like it didn't matter to me. Didn't matter to me whether you were white or Hispanic or if you were Catholic or Protestant or if you were gay or not gay. Like you were all getting treated badly. Like I was going to be mean to everybody. It was like universal.
Yes,
So,
especially since we're talking about when we were 18.
yes, when I
You were
was
much
18,
different.
I'm a much different person now, which, by the way, people, it kind of goes to show what we've talked about. You can change, right? Like you change. I understand brain theory a lot better now. Like it's part of my gig, right? So I tend to do it a lot. But when you're 18, your brain is informed. Your prefrontal cortex hasn't finished. You don't have that understanding yet. And as an 18-year-old boy like me, mine wasn't even like starting to form, I feel like. Right? I had no ideas about like what was going to happen to me, right? Like YOLO, right? Like it didn't matter. Nowadays it does, right? Nowadays it does. Here's an interesting side note for my 18-year-old, which I thought was really funny. And so I'll share this story with our listeners and with you. But the other day she was like, oh my gosh, I saw this great thing about how you can, like, as a great example of what makes a Gen Z different than other people. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'm waiting for the normal 18-year-old gibberish, right? And she's like, so there's this guy, and she goes, he gets into a rollover accident. Like his car rolls over like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, right? And she goes, it gets done rolling over. She goes, and he pulls out his phone and he's like, guys, you like won't believe what just happened. I just rolled the car 3 or 4 times. I think I need to call the cops. I need to call an ambulance or something. I'm hanging upside down right now in my car. This is insane. I'm like, I go, that is the best Gen Z example ever. She goes, seriously. She goes, we would like, that's what we would do, right? Like we document everything and we
Is she considered Gen Z?
Yeah, I believe she's part of Gen Z. I'd have to look. But I laugh and I go, and the difference between your generation and mine? And she's like, what? I go, I still remember in high school, one of our buddies rolled his car. And she goes, oh. And I go, of course, we didn't have cameras. And she's like, right. So what did he do? I go, he got out and he rolled the car back over. I go, what the hell else would you do?
He had to get home.
He had to get home. Why would he sit there? Why would he call for help? Why would he be like, Dad, someone come get me? I'm like, no, he got his ass out, rolled the car back over.
No, it was a rabbit. So there's something to be said for that.
That's what I did say.
He was a big boy.
But I laughed because I remember once like taking one of my trucks down a road and it just like sunk to the rims. And I didn't like call home. Like you didn't have phones.
Right? No, you didn't. No.
And so you had to figure that crap out yourself and get it out. And you hope somebody would come save you or do something.
I was just, it's funny. I was just telling Gina that story where it was this big snowstorm. The snow was mostly done, but I missed a turn. And I had to turn around, and I turned what looked like a driveway, happened to just be a ditch. So the 40 square wagon was like deep in the ditch. It's like 4 feet deep. And 4 big old farm boys and a big pickup truck were driving by. They stopped, they pushed me out, and off we went.
And off you went. Right? Like literally, it wasn't a thing that you and I'm like, I don't think they get that, right? Like nowadays. But I'm like, so yeah, totally different generation, right? Like a Gen Xer, which you hear that a lot. Like people make fun of Gen Xers nowadays, which,
Mm-hmm.
growing up, people were always like, those Gen Xers, they're going to be trouble. They're going to be deadbeats and blah, blah, blah. And it
Mm-hmm.
turned out not to be the case. And now people look at Gen Xers like, oh my gosh, these Gen Xers, they were a bunch of hard asses. And we're like, we weren't hard asses. We didn't have a choice.
Yeah. You
Like
said
our
they're
parents
smart.
were the boomers. They were the ones
Mm-hmm.
who were high all the time. They didn't care about raising us. We just
Mm-hmm.
did what we did and did what we had to do.
Yeah.
Like it just was.
Mm-hmm. Oh, because Y is after millennial, right? Oh no.
um,
It's Gen X, Gen Y, then millennial.
yeah, I think
But
so.
yes, but I can the Ys I can see doing that because they got phones a lot earlier than we did,
Right, right.
things like that. And okay, I don't know why that just popped into my head, but yeah, you're right. It's funny. I there on Facebook. There's all sorts of funny little memes and
Oh
stuff.
yeah, people
Gen
do that
Xers.
all the time. Okay, so Gen Z was born between 1995 and 2012. This is just the first thing
Okay.
that popped up on the Google search, people.
Okay.
So this isn't like official.
Mm-hmm.
Gen X was 65 to 79
Mm-hmm.
ish. These are all ishes.
Yeah.
Millennials were 80 to 94.
Okay. So the millennials were in between, and then Gen Y.
Yes.
Okay.
And the millennials were the ones, basically, kind of how you think about it is millennials were the ones who turned 18 and 20 and all that
Mm,
during the millennial shift, right?
okay.
Right. So 80 was 20 years before
Mm-hmm.
the millennium,
Yeah.
right? And then Gen Z was 95, 2012. Gen Z is the group who's never known anything
Y.
but the internet and the
O
cell
Z.
phone.
Yeah.
Gen
Yeah.
Z.
Never.
And nowadays we're in Gen Alpha, this says
Okay. So would that be
2013 to
Cal?
2025. So he would be a Gen Alpha, right?
Interesting.
And again, just kind of a rough, you know, a rough
First thing
thing.
on Google. Yeah.
First thing on Google, people, not official, not
Please
official.
don't send any hate mail.
Yes. I mean, you can
Oh
put
yeah, for sure.
comments and we'll just laugh about it on the next episode. So if you haven't learned by now from listening to us, anybody who's new, who we met at FeedCon, yeah, we seriously don't care. Right. So as Gary Vee preaches, right? Why would you care what other people think? We lost. I don't know if we ever had the ability. You for
Really
sure
care.
didn't. Like I know you didn't from the first time I saw you wearing a perm in middle school, right? You did not have that ability, right?
So the first 4 years I was in your grade, you didn't notice me?
I didn't know you were there until middle school.
That's what like I don't remember Heather till 8th grade.
Didn't she not move there until eighth grade?
I guess she was around before that.
Wait,
We've
so
had
what?
we've had this talk before
So wait,
that
what
like
changed about Heather that you all of a
I
sudden
don't
noticed her in eighth grade?
I have no idea. Actually, maybe it's I don't remember till 9th grade.
So when do you
But
remember
anyways,
Tamara Isley?
I've never thought about that. I'm not sure. Probably the same.
Probably right around the same time. Man, that's so weird. I wonder what changed about us or them that we all of a sudden recognize them.
No, because I want to say we've had this talk before, and Heather, I think she came around like early middle school, is
Yeah.
what she says, but I don't remember her at all. But we'll have to get it. We'll have to get her on here. We'll have to have this talk again because it's always funny because she's so scandalized when I say that.
We'll have to get her on the show. We'll have to get her on. I
Mhm.
mean, her life story is an interesting story too.
It is.
So an interview with Heather would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have to make that happen, people.
Her and I had a lot of similarities, especially in high school, to where when I think about people making choices, that both her and I were making those choices to not use something as an excuse.
Yes, both of you did. Speaking of that, similarly, we got into a discussion at the birthday dinner today.
Awesome.
And it was interesting. They had asked if I was going to go out drinking when my oldest kid turns 21. Like, you're going to go do a shot with them. And I go, probably not. I'm like, I'd do a shot with you. And this was to my youngest daughter. And she's like, oh, you would? And I'm like, for sure, I'd have a drink with you. why not the other one? I'm like, why would I drink with her like that? That doesn't sound fun at all. And she's like, what about the one whose birthday it is? And I'm like, well, she's not gonna probably drink.
Mm-hmm.
And then that one was like, yeah, I mixed all the White Russians. This is the youngest daughter. I mixed all the
Mm-hmm.
White Russians at Christmas, and I was sampling all of those. I'm like, what? And then she started telling all these stories about her mother, who was like, ooh, try this champagne. Oh, try this wine cooler. I'm like, wait, what? What? And I almost called you. I almost called you
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, what is going on here? And they're like all laughing at me. I'm like, you're like turning my daughter into an alcoholic. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Giving her all these sips. And she's like, oh, come on, as if you weren't sipping off your parents' drinks your whole time in high school. I'm like, no, I wasn't.
Nope.
I'm like, I thought you knew that. Like, I used to call you all the time and say, when was my first drink? And you'd be like, when he turned 21.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only time I drank before I turned 21, if you could count them drinking, and I think you can, was A, when I was like between 5 and 10, and I didn't know what alcohol was. Every time the family made me go get beers, because it was always the youngest child's job to get beers and open them
Mm-hmm.
and bring them to all the adults, I always took a sip of the beers.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know they were alcohol or that that was an adult thing.
Yeah.
We're Irish, like the beer flows like water, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that it wasn't great and I would rather have a Mountain Dew. So I would grab a sip, give them the beer, grab a sip, give them the beer,
Mm-hmm.
not thinking it. And the other time is, again, being that we're older, the common, and I get yelled at for trying to do this, though I've heard that it's fine and now it's making a resurgence. But the cough medicine I had 90% of the time was whiskey, water, lemon juice, and honey.
It's a great
Like
cough medicine,
my mom
really.
would be like, oh, you need cough medicine. And I would drink that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was drinking whiskey whenever I was sick growing up. And that was like,
Mm-hmm.
I still remember my mom, and I think my wife was like scandalized at first, but I did it a couple times and got yelled at a couple times. But like
Mm-hmm.
the kids, when they were teething, they'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, the teething is bad. My mom would always be like, but just put some whiskey on their gums.
Mm-hmm.
That'll take care of it. And I'm like, really? My would be like,
Yeah.
you can't give a baby alcohol. I'm like, it's like just rubbing it on their gums. Like you're not like
Yeah.
giving them shots.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I was like, no, I didn't take sips. I was like super anti
Yeah.
alcohol that whole time. Like,
Well, that's how you were a dare role model, and I got kicked out of being a dare role model.
well, you chose to leave Dare Role Model because you didn't think it was being honest.
Well, they asked me to lie.
They asked you
That's
to
why
lie.
I was. That's
Right.
why I left. I guess
Yes.
I didn't get kicked out
No.
because I experimented when I was in middle school,
Right.
and by high school, passed it.
Yes. Which I think is important for kids to know.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
but also, you and I both, and again, listeners, you know this about us, we're very honest people. And so people asking us to lie is just a hard pass.
Yeah.
It's just a hard pass. I cannot talk about something. It's very hard for me to lie about something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wasn't willing to do that. But that was, there were other people who filled that role and did a good
Yes.
job with it.
Yes. Yes. Back in the Darrow Mouse. Don't know if we changed anybody's lives. Maybe we did. Maybe we did.
Who knows? That whole
Did you see the YouTube mini I put up this week?
I did not.
Oh my gosh. So this could be
Only
because
Tuesday. Or
this
you mean
could
last week?
maybe last week. Between I measure my weeks from podcast to podcast.
Okay.
So
I did not.
before the last podcast. I don't know if I would have said this if we hadn't been to the VCon, okay? But I've been really working on, I'm always, we've talked about this, I'm always like so happy for everything I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I've been trying to make a real conscious effort to not have that negative talk ever. Like I still do. We talked about that last episode, but to sit there and think anytime I start feeling grumpy about something, like to try to flip that switch and say, okay, but like
Yeah.
like I had to go work on a rental. I worked all day Saturday, Sunday on a rental, right? And it sucked. And I remember at one point going, oh, I've got to go back to the rental. And I was like, no, I get to go to the rental. I literally own an entire other house. How
Mm-hmm.
many people wish they had one freaking house? And
Mm-hmm.
I have multiple, which, yes, is a pain in my ass, but I made the choice and I get to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something you talked about my 18-year-old daughter. Oftentimes, like we'd be doing stuff and she'd be like, I'm like, no, you get to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do it. You get to. Always remember,
Yeah.
you get to.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few things that are have tos. So I've been doing that, and part of that's from VCon, right? But in general, you and I are positive people like that. But I'm like, I got mildly grumpy, and I was trying hard not to be grumpy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of talked about this just a little bit on my mini, but I was out shopping Saturday morning. Oh, you just froze. There you are. Um, my wife needed to get an oil change. So she had scheduled an oil change for Saturday morning. And, we were talking about all the stuff we have to do. And she was like, yeah, I've got this scheduled. And I'm like, well, I'll go and, I've got stuff to do over there for the rentals. So I've got stuff to buy. I'll go over there. And she's like, yeah, and I need to go to the hardware to get like plants and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, cool. So we'll go do that and we'll go get our stuff done. She's like, cool. So we drop the car off. It's like, I don't know, 9 a.m., 9:30.
Mm-hmm.
And they come out and they're like, okay, it'll be ready by like 2:30. And she's like, it's not gonna be ready till 2:30. I'm like, that's fine. Like, we got stuff to do. It's not
Mm-hmm.
that big of a deal. And I'm like, didn't you want breakfast? And she's like, yeah, I want breakfast. I'm like, okay, well, what are you in the mood for? I don't know. I'm not in the mood for anything. I'm like, okay, we haven't been to Denny's for a long time. Let's go to Denny's. By the
Mm-hmm.
way, people, as grateful as I am for things like Denny's, it sucked. Um,
Yeah, I was like, Danny, so many amazing choices in Lansing.
yeah,
You
I
go some
don't.
places
I was
bad
like, it's
everywhere.
been so long since we've had Denny's. Let's try Denny's.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, no, but it was not great. So, friends, it wasn't great. I did not.
Mm-hmm.
I ate my food because I'm an eater, but I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like. So we leave. We go to the hardware. We buy all this stuff, and we're like leaving. I'm like, you know what? I need to get some tires from another place. And she's like, oh, I just want to get home and get to work. I'm like, right, but it's noon, and your
Mm-hmm.
Jeep's done it too. So it's
Yeah.
okay. Like, we got 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
We might as well do stuff, and I have to go over here anyway. I know, but it's just annoying. Like, one of us could be getting work done. You could just drop me off. I'm like, okay, well, like after this, I can drop you off. Then we passed Gordon's Food. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like, hey, we have the party coming up. You wanted to go to Gordon's. Why don't on the way back we go to Gordon's? And she was like, well, I don't want to go to Gordon's. I want to go home and get work done. And I'm like, right, but we've got 2 hours to kill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, you could just drop me off and you go home and then I'll come home later. I'm like, you would still have time to kill. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
we could like get this done. No, I just wanted to go home. I'm like, okay. And I'm like driving. I'm like, listen, I go, you are getting to spend the morning with the love of your life, driving around, no kids, no distractions. We're going to breakfast. We're going shopping. We get the opportunity to have a great time.
Mm-hmm.
I go, and all you're doing is being anxious about a party that's 2 weeks away because you want to get to work instead of enjoying the fact that you get to spend 2 more hours hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I'll drop you off. I go, I don't care. I go, but
Yeah.
seriously, you're not recognizing what's awesome. Like, this is something people really wish they could have. You get to have it right now, and you're bitching.
Yeah.
And she's like, and I go into the store and I get my tires. She goes in with me, and I get my tires and stuff. And I leave, and she's like, we can go to Gordon's. I'm like, listen, we don't have to. I'll drop you off. No, you're right. There's stuff there I have to get. We might as well get it as we're going to get it. like we go and start shopping, she gets a call and they're like, it's going to be done at 12:30,
Mm-hmm.
which, now we're like 10 minutes away from that. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, see, like there was no reason to be all anxious. And we
Yeah.
get our shopping done. We got ahead of things because we shopped for a ton of stuff that she wasn't planning on getting for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And we go get the Jeep. And I'm like, how freaking awesome. Like you did all this. She had a baby shower the next day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're like getting ready to do stuff. And she's like, tomorrow, it's like a 3 hour drive, hour and a half there, hour and a half back. And I have all this work to done. And this makes me so mad. And I'm like, whoa, honey, you haven't seen those people in like 2 years, 3 years. Yeah. You get an opportunity to go
Mm-hmm.
spend the day. I'm like, and you're driving there with your sick mother and your sister for
Mm-hmm.
3 hours. You get to spend 3 hours with your mom, who every day you complain you don't get to see enough. And you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get to see her for a straight 3 hours in a car where she can't escape. You've got to be grateful,
Mm-hmm.
not grumpy. Like, maybe that should be a chapter. Be grateful, not grumpy. Right?
Yes. No, you're exactly right. And that's awesome.
Right. And
So was she excited the next day?
she's like, she went at it with a totally different attitude. When
Mm-hmm.
she got home, she was so happy. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
I still think I could have got stung, but it was such a great trip and it was so good. And she was like bubbling over. And I'm like, that's it, right? Like,
Yes.
change your mindset. And I don't like using the word mindset. I think that's kind of dumb. But in this case, change that perception.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like monopolizing all the time, right?
I think that was an awesome story.
But you've got to see that too in your life, right? Where people are doing that or you're doing it and you're like, I've got to reframe this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's something that I've been working on for so long, and I still do notice it. And, especially having just seen Gary and stuff, it is still fresh, which is nice. I can really see it in other people. And that's where it's like pointing out, because I do the same thing with Gina. She might say something or, not be looking at things the way I would look at things, and just kind of point it out, gently
Yeah.
nudge, because we love them very much. And we want them
Yes.
to be happy and to,
We don't, well, and like for mine, she complains a lot. Like her dad is turning so negative, right? Life is rough.
mm,
And she's like, it's like he had a buffer before from my mom keeping him positive, and now
mm-hmm,
he's lost that. And I'm like,
yeah,
right. And I'm like seeing that like appearing. And I'm like, you definitely don't want to be that way. I know you don't want to be that way.
yes,
But it's so easy to get caught up in the day's minutia.
mm-hmm,
And I said it to somebody today, totally different, but I was like, I don't think people are aware of how lucky they are to work with us. Like, not
mm-hmm,
because it's me, but our place of work is amazing. And I don't think people realize how amazing it is. And I'm
mm-hmm,
like, they get caught up in these stupid things instead of realizing you can argue about stupid things, but the whole is still awesome. Right?
yeah, yeah,
Sure.
it is. And I was thinking the same thing as when one of my cars broke down this week, and I was sitting there waiting for the tow truck. And then I was sitting there at the dealership, and it was just like, just go with the flow.
Go with it's a good time to
Think,
meditate. Worst case
yeah.
scenario, meditate, right?
Mm-hmm.
My mom
Deepak
would always
does say
say,
that.
if you have those issues, just pray. You get to pray
Mm-hmm.
today. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
thanks, Mom. Thanks. So anyway, people, we are running out of time.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to end this episode. We love you all. Stay positive. Keep your eye on gratitude. And this is Ballbuster signing off.
Yeah, Kilted Dragon Chair. Love you all.